anyone else get nervous when they're pitching? Don't panic. My name's Josephine and I'm going to teach you in half an hour how to pitch like a queen. In fact, what I want to do today is to share the strategies that I used to raise $2.5 million and win countless awards. So what we're going to cover is why you should master this thing called pitching. We're going to basically skip over what goes in your pitch because there's not a lot I can value add to that you can't already find on Google. Why you need to change your mindset and how changing my mindset really helped me learn how to pitch and become much better at it. And then things that you won't find on Google, which is some of the really practical strategies that I used when I was in the room and how that helped. So I'm going to start with why is pitching a skill that you should master? Okay, so I'm working at UWA in 2000. I started about 2015, and in 2017 we get this idea from my boss, long story, about how we could diagnose irritable bowel syndrome differently, better, without invasive colonoscopy. So we're working on this tech. But I have a problem. The money's running out. I've got this research team, machine learning team. Research funding for medical is really hard to get. Even when I'm working for a Nobel laureate, my success rate's 20%. So the money's running out. We'd raised initially $1 million in philanthropic funds. That's running out, and I'm really starting to think, well, where's our next dollar going to come from? And in the midst of all this, we decided to spin the IP out to Noisy Guts Proprietary Limited. So now I'm really starting to get worried. And people would say to me, why don't you do a family and friends round? And I think, have you met my family? Do you know my friends? I need $2.5 million. Where is that money going to come from? So I started panicking, and because of that need to raise that money, that's why I learned how to pitch and how to pitch well, because the money had to come from somewhere, and it was really up to me to do that. So that's why I decided to learn how to pitch. So how many pitches do you think it would take? No, you can't answer, Jack. How many times do you think I had to pitch to raise $2.5 million? Now let me put this in context. I'm a female founder. I'm a first-time female founder. I'm a first-time female founder of a particular age, over the hump. I'm a first-time female founder of a particular age living in the most isolated city in the world. How many times am I pitching? 5.
60. 200.
The correct answer is a shitload, yeah? But technically, it's 60. So, it is 60. All right, so this is what it looks like though. So the first 10 are what I call the practice pitches. These aren't to your mum, these aren't to friendlies, these are to venture capitalists. Main Sequence, Airtree, One Ventures, CP Ventures. These were to venture capitalists who had invested in medtech, but they were never ever going to realistically invest in a medical device like Noisy Guts. I knew that. So why would you go and invest to them? Because venture capitalists really, they ask the best questions. You'll come out battered and bruised. That made our pitch so much better. Every time they asked a question, that was like, oh crap, next feedback. I need to take that feedback, put it into my pitch. So whilst it was tough work and we came out with a bruise every time we did it, pitching to venture capitalists was the best. Main Sequence, Phil Moore was probably my toughest audience as someone, because he had some chronic health issues. He was kind of empathetic, but he was brutal. The more brutal, the better. So put yourself out there and go for people, venture capitalists who will improve your pitch. So about 10 in that space. Then we did the comps and awards. Why did we do comps and awards? Because, I don't know that I didn't have that network. I didn't have the family and friends who had $2.5 million. So what do? We apply for every single award in pitching competition. Innovator of the Year, WAITA, the I Awards, the Whitwer Awards, the Pitch for $1 Million, the Lasanne's Best Pitch of the West. Whatever it was, I went and did it, and thankfully, mostly we won. But why did we do that? Was because I was trying to get to the people who had $2.5 million. So we had this strategy of, at the Innovator of the Year Awards, which is my favourite event, before we went in, I'd just take photos of the seating plans. And then by the end of the night, I had followed all of those people on LinkedIn. I would find startups that were 2 steps ahead of us. They had already got investors, and they had all take their investors to these lovely award events. Great. So I would just follow them, find out who those startups were, and then I'd meet these people then. So by the time we had done all of this pitching, we'd won Innovator of the Year, we'd done the I Awards, we'd won, we really had a good year. Even this season, this award season, we've done 3 awards for the Australian Small Business Championships, the Women's Small Business and Zero, and we're finalists in all 3. So why did we do that? Is to try and raise our profile. By the end of 2020, there wasn't an investor in Perth who hadn't heard of us. Everyone had heard about Noisy Guts, and that's why we put at least, and another 33%, or around 20 pitches into that to raise our profile. And instead of having a cold call, when I did finally meet those investors, those people who I'd been seeing at these award nights, they were like, yeah, Noisy Guts, I've heard of you. Great. And along with that, the PR that went with that, media, startup news, the podcasts, the LinkedIn. We were just trying to saturate the market so everyone had heard of us. The NQRs, so these are what I call my not quite rights. We knew that there are investors that Ivan Gustavinos and Malcolm McCuskers of the world, they were never going to give us money. They hadn't invested in medtech before, but we knew that their Rolodex, they knew people who had money. I didn't. So I'd go to them, I'd pitch with this really clear ask. Not will you give me money, but can you introduce me to 3 people that you know who are actively investing in this space I could talk to? It was kind of like having an influencer strategy for e-commerce. If they liked me, then maybe they'd recommend me to my friends or to their friends, because my friends didn't have $2.5 million. So we did another kind of 20 odd in that NQR space, and then that got to our actual investors, of which I pitched 10 times, and that's where the money came from. So it took 60 times to raise the money. It was a lot. Okay, so what actually went in the pitch? If you just Google what person pitch, you'll get a universal pitch deck. This is the one we used, but we used this one this is the one we started with because we were a science spin out, so we're a spin out of UWA, and it was very science tech focused. So this is why we use this one. In the end, what you'll end up with is about a pitch deck of 30, 40 slides, and then you'll cut that down to 8, which you'll use depending on what's relevant, depending on who's in the room, depending on who you're pitching to. But what goes into pitch, the universal pitch deck will give you a start. Okay, so then, the most useful tool out of all of the pitch decks was the GAICD pitch. There's 3 sentences around, how, blah, 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 here's the problem. Well, what we do is we have this solution. In fact, this is why the solution is so good. So it's a GAICD pitch, 3 sentences, 30 seconds. When someone says at a barbecue, hey, what do you do? Here's your pitch. Does someone have a GAICD pitch? Is someone brave enough to try a GAICD pitch now? Come on. Someone try one. Anyone? Go. You try.
Okay. So I was trying this actually with mine. It's a weird. But you know how kids at school have mental health issues? So they can get up to all sorts of stuff online, from Googling weird stuff, going on TikTok and seeing strange stuff. Well, what we do is we have a solution that monitors what they're doing online using the data from the firewall that they're going through at the school. In fact, we're pretty unique because Firewalls just log all the crap that's happening from a student's machine, like content delivery networks and advertising, visited pixels and all of that stuff. So we clean all of that junk out and we show you exactly what people are doing online.
What do we think? I mean, we could cut and refine, but we've got it. And I think the reason it works is sometimes people come and say, hey, you know how, and they say something so specific, and I think, and they've lost me already, because actually I didn't know that, I wasn't aware that was a problem. But when you started out with, you know how mental health is an issue with young people and on computers, yeah, I get that, I can recognise that. All right, is anyone else feeling brave?
Come on.
Come on, one more. No? Right. Well, we're going to come back to this during the break so you can practice, yeah?
A couple of minutes to settle into that.
Josephine,
Yeah.
it strikes me that if I were trying to do this exercise, the logical order would be 1, 3, and 2. Does that make any sense? And would it completely defeat?
Yeah.
Yes, it would, okay.
Yeah. Problem, solution. In fact, this is why our solution is so unique. Yeah. And that's why it works. Simple, short. Most of the pitching I do at the moment is not to VCs, it's to buyers, it's to distributors, it's to people in the supply chain, where I'm trying to get them, will my IGA take on Superflora? I don't have any more than 3 sentences. And I have to convince a person to put my product on the shelf, which often will mean taking another product off the shelf because there's not enough space on the shelf, and that person is probably stacking shelves while I'm pitching to them. That's why you have 3 sentences. Here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's why you should have my product. Here's why my solution is the best solution. So really short, really snappy. So this is your homework. We can practice that. So over coffee after this, hopefully I'll hear some more. Okay, so what do you do with your nerves? So often I get very nervous before I start speaking. So what do you do with that, and how do you try and get over that so you can pitch and communicate well? When I changed my mindset to be less about me and what I was feeling and what I was thinking, and more about the audience, that allows you to get out of your own way and think about what does your audience need out of this? Who are you talking to and what do they want? In most cases, whenever I'm either investors or suppliers, they're not waiting, except for some of those VCs who are pretty brutal. But most people are very gentle. Most people are fairly kind. Most people that I'm talking to are wanting to learn something from me. So when I get out of my own way and think about less about me, and my delivery, and more about what is the person sitting down, why have you come here today, what kind of information can I give you, what can I share with you, how can I make this a valuable use of your time. When I start thinking about you and less about me, that mindset was the thing that helped me shift and helped me change. And I went to see Hamilton recently with my daughters in Melbourne, and Aaron Burr's advice to Hamilton was to talk less and smile more. So often when I advise startups who are going to pitch, I say just talk less and listen, because you can't listen while you're talking. So listen more in the room. What do people ask? What type of questions are people asking of you? Which is great. Either they don't understand something you're saying, or they're interested. What are they interested in? So talking less and listening more. Okay, so I wanted to talk through some strategies around what I actually did in the room. So we talked. So I often talk to people about being really clear about your ask. Why are you pitching, and what do you hope to achieve? And actually, for most startups, they're actually not clear about what is their ask. What question are you going to leave the room with? And often when I ask people around, well, what do you hope to achieve out of pitching? They're actually not very clear. Or they'll answer in a general sentence. Oh, I'm just wanting some general feedback about my startup, or I'm just wanting to test the waters. That's not an ask, that's a statement. You actually need a question. So what are you going to go into what's the purpose of pitching, and what is your one clear ask? So we often joke with my little startup mentees around singing the Spice Girls, what do you want, what do you really, really want? And making sure that you end your pitch or even start with, here is my ask, this is what I'm wanting. So you actually get something, you don't just have a lovely conversation and a really nice cup of coffee, you can do that at any time. So being really clear about your ask. The table setting, so capturing what happens in the room. So often because you're pitching, 50% of your brain power is, taken up, and you're not really thinking about people's body language. What are their non-verbal cues? How are they reacting? Are your messages landing? But you're so busy delivering your messages, you might not be open to that. So having a note taker, you don't want to record the session because then people are not going to talk freely. But having a note taker brings someone else into the room who can capture that non-verbal information for you, who can write down every question and who it came from. For me, I need a seating plan because I'm not great with names, but when I have a seating plan, I've written everyone's names down, I can then go, Jack, great question, thanks for asking. And so what I'm trying to do is build a connection with Jack so that, we can go and have a coffee later. And if I don't refer to him by name, am I really building that? So having a seating plan where I've written everyone's names down and I write information about them, particularly as soon as the pitch is over, I'll go down and write notes. What questions did they ask? What's their general level of interest? You'll be amazed at information that comes out during the Q&A around, my daughter's got IBS. Great. I can send them information about teenagers with IBS and treatments. What do you need in the room? So I will say to people, most people will have a PowerPoint slide, but you want to be the spotlight on you. You want to be talking, and make sure you are the centre. So what do you need in the room? You need things, if there's anything, that will help communicate your message in a way that perhaps, they'll reinforce what you're saying. So for us, we had an acoustic belt. I couldn't wear the belt myself because middle-aged men would look at my stomach and feel very uncomfortable. They weren't quite sure where to look. So we had a mannequin called Flora. So I would take my dress mannequin, Flora, with us. She had her own Twitter account, became hilarious, particularly at awards night. She'd be legless. She caught the plane over on Qantas with the West Coast Eagles. We had a lot of fun with Flora, and she developed her own personality, but she would wear the belt for me, and it was a great thing to walk into a room with. This is what the belt looks like. Can you see any problems with this? So this is the belt. And this, so I often say to people, show me the product. I'm a very visual person. I want to see what the product is. So we had this mocked up. Who am I talking to? Who are my investors?
Middle-aged men.
Middle-aged men. They thought it was a sex toy, didn't they? They just had no idea. They were really uncomfortable with it, and they don't want to look at abs like that because they don't have abs like that. So we offended every female in the world. Oh my God, did I cop criticism for this? I know this model. I had people measuring the distance between the thigh. I had so many complaints at UWA from the female professors there. I apologised profusely to them. But I had to get people's attention. I had to get the attention of middle-aged men because a lot of the investors I was talking to would dismiss IBS because it's a women's problem and they don't want to talk about bowel health, they don't want to talk about poop. But she became the face of our campaign. She woke people up, she got attention, and our bloke didn't. So, yeah, sex sells. Right. So, here are my strategies. Am I going all right for time? I've talked a lot, haven't I? Yeah, okay. So get really, really clear on your ask. What is your ask? Make sure it's a single question, not a statement. I'm here for feedback, or, you know, I wanted to see if you have any general interest in this space. No, what's your single question that you're going to ask from people in the room? Capture what happens in the room, either through a note taker by writing really good notes yourself, which is very hard to do at the time, but sometimes you're just forced to do that. So as soon as your pitching is over, go outside and start writing. Capture who is in the room, so your seating plan. Obviously you've done a lot of research beforehand to work out who's going to be in the room. You've stalked them on LinkedIn, you've had a look at their CVs, you know as much about them as possible. Only use props that help communicate. So if you're using a PowerPoint slide, there's this rule around, you know, the font size being half the age of the people who are listening to it. But you don't want sentences on your PowerPoint slides, you just want dot points. You want images because they will communicate 1,000 times better than words. So only use props that help you communicate. Paint a picture of your customer. I really like this one. Because as I was saying, with the middle-aged men I was talking to, very few of them had IBS, IBD, Crohn's, colitis, celiac. So I had to paint a really detailed picture of who our customer was. I might not be your customer, but if you paint a good enough picture of that person, I could then relate to them. Oh, you're talking about my brother-in-law. Yeah, my brother-in-law's into that stuff, yeah. So paint me a picture of who that customer is and be really, really specific. Seeing is believing, so show the product. And you're going to say, yeah, but I don't have a product. We didn't have a product either. We did not have a working product when we started talking to investors. We were working with an engineering team, a design team that mocked up the belt for us, the picture of the pictures that you saw. But really, what we went with this was what we were using. See all the wires that are conveniently hidden? It was ugly. It was ugly, it was agricultural, but that's what we had. We just made it look like that on the front of our brochures. But seeing is believing. So you've got to show people the product and sell them the vision. And talk less and listen more. You'll find out incredible things about your investors, who their family is, how they experience your problem, what their pain points are, what they're looking for. The worst thing about the investors process was not actually raising, but how do you close? How do you close and actually close the round? And this process can go on for ages because we actually don't want to know. As humans, we prefer to have maybes than no's. When you're raising money, you just need to either a yes or a no straight out. Get to that no as fast as you can because maybes are horrible. So some of the questions I didn't ask investors were things like, have you got capital available now? Are you ready to invest? Are you interested in that and are you ready? It was so interesting that we had been chatting to this guy for ages and ages, really well-known Perth investor. He said, my wife just bought a house down in Yellingup. This is in the peak of and actually all my cash is tied up to next April. Oh crap, if I'd known that 6 months ago, or if I'd known that, I wouldn't have put so much time into nurturing this relationship. He doesn't have cash until, next year. But we often are too embarrassed to ask these questions. So you need to get to a fast yes or a fast no. The maybes are not so great. Okay, I think that's me. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Or are you ready to do your pitch for me? No.
So you were pitching based on pre-revenue, just an idea. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. So with our acoustic belt, we were doing science at UWA, so we had some clinical data. And we had a very agricultural looking belt with wires attached. In fact, the first belt that we made was from bits from J-Carp and Bunnings. So the one that Flora's wearing actually looks pretty good because the actual real thing, I didn't want to take it into an investor meeting because it looked so bad. So that's all we had. We didn't have revenue. And in fact, the problem with medical devices and medical tech is that I can't sell anything. I can't even give it to a customer. I can't ask people how much they're willing to pay for it until I get through to TGA. So I needed $2.5 million to get to the TGA. The great thing about what I really love about food goods is, hi, I've got a product. There's this immediate transaction. We went to the Subiaco markets a few weeks ago with the new protein balls, and you just go and try it. Hey, you meet a customer. You want to buy this? Yeah, I'll buy it. Oh no, I won't buy that. It's too expensive. What? You get feedback instantly. With medtech, you've got years before you'll ever meet a customer.
So basically, you pivoted towards this, or you're still doing the belt? Or?
So the belt failed its first clinical trial.
Yeah.
So the data just wasn't where we needed to be to continue commercialising it. So we pivoted quickly because we wanted to pivot to tech and do another clinical trial. Who's going to fund my clinical trial? So we pivoted to get a food product out. Superflora paid for the next clinical trial, and we just got the results of that. We just needed to stay alive. If we'd raised money for the new tech, for the clinical trial, we would have done a down round, and we were really trying to avoid that. So that's why we decided we'd bootstrap the clinical trial.
Question, you mentioned about reading the room.
Yeah.
Have you had an experience where you're partway through your pitch and you're picking up some things in the room and you're feeling like, I can see 2 slides ahead and this is not where I need to be, and have to kind of change up what you're talking about? And how do you manage doing that when often, to get rid of nerves, you kind of practice and practice and practice and practice? So being able to be agile, how do you go with that? Has that happened to you?
It's so happened to me on so many occasions. At the Rotto West Tech Fest, what's the event called, Scott? You know, the one at Rotto? Rotto West Tech Fest. And who was the big investor that comes over that funded? Yeah. I started pitching, and within 20 seconds, 30 seconds maybe, and he's right in the front row and I'm staring right at him, and after 27 he's looked me up and down and he's gone straight back to his phone, and my heart's just gone, oh great, So you either focus, like I just have to blank you out now because I've lost him. And that can happen genuinely because he doesn't do medtech, not interested in medtech, so he's just made that assumption straight away. That's fine because he's not your audience. He's never ever going to.
I was going to say, how do you know he's not looking you up on LinkedIn to see how interesting you are?
No. Because you can tell yep, and he's just emailing. Like you can just tell. He's just gone. And he'd never done anything in that medtech space. I thought, but because he had supported female founders, I just kind of thought maybe. So what do? I just have to blank him out and try and work out who else is in the room. Sometimes there are other times where I've just had to. Okay, this approach isn't working. I've been given 10 minutes. I've pulled it back to 7 because I want to talk less, listen more, and I'm 3 minutes in. I've realised I'm losing the room quickly, and I've just had to put the notes down and go to. So what can I, ask a question, get them engaged. So what can I tell you about noisy guts? What is it that you want to know? And along the way, you're going to have a lot of sharks from West Perth who are going to say, oh, we'll do this raise for you. What I always found is that the investors wanted to look into the whites of my eyes and actually talk to me. They didn't want to talk to, someone who'd do this for me. And what you'll learn after you've been battered and bruised a few times is that not all money's equal. You will want to look into the whites of the investor's eyes and work out what kind of money do you have, what kind of strings are attached to it. They're a bit like mother-in-laws, lovely people, but, they're monsters.
So if it's not a secret, what kind of, so for the 2.5 million, what is the breakdown of the different kinds of investors that you have involved in the background?
So we didn't go for, people like find a lead investor, we didn't do that. Obviously we had Barry Marshall, who's the Nobel laureate here, so he was a charismatic kind of lead, but so we had him. We went for, we started with Martin Blake, He was someone who I had spoken to for a very, very, very long time. He was never going to actually hand over cash. And then over the Christmas period where all of these parties started, of which I wasn't going to because I didn't have those connections, there were enough people who started talking to him about us. So then it started happening quite quickly. But we went for high networks who were willing to take a punt. And that's where the money came from. Almost all of them, except Michael Mosley, all of them were Perth-based. So, and it was just around finding one, and then I get a call from them saying, oh, I didn't realise he was investing, now he's in, I'll be in. And then once you have enough people who do that, 2, 3, 4 of those, you can then ask them, because someone's put money in, who else would they like to bring in as well?
So Barry Marshall was the first taker.
Yeah, Barry was the first. And then getting, for every investor, who else do you know? And that's my question. Who else do you know? Who else do you know is actively investing? Who else do you know on the Perth scene that I can talk to? Because I just didn't have those names in the Rolodex anywhere. Yeah.
Josephine, you've spoken a lot about the ask. What about the proposition? Don't investors come and want to know what's in it for them? I don't know. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just trust that.
They just want money. They're giving you money and they're hoping for a return and they're hoping for a huge return.
Aren't you describing this at all? The kind of return, the time frame, the potential markets? I don't know.
It was less about the content in the end than I thought. It's and people will say that it's not about the product. Actually, it was less about that.
So not one of your slides is about what you're proposing?
Yeah, one of them is around the timeline. This is how long it's going to take to market. This is how big the market is. But what we found is that any of those detailed questions, if people wanted to know, how long it was going to take for us to break even, it's actually not a question you get to in 7 minutes. It would be in one of our FAQ slides, so it won't be in the top 8 slides. If someone were to ask you that detailed question, that's great. That's kind of really triggering to me that they're actually interested in them. So I can just quickly go down to that slide, which was, number 16 in the deck, and I can show them and bring that up. But you don't get someone who's going to say, okay, I'll invest $1 million based on a 10-minute conversation. What you're trying to do is get to the next meeting, where perhaps then that can come out. But in your first pitch, I don't think you're getting there. You might have this lovely hockey tick slide, but I don't think you're getting there into that level of detail in 7 minutes.
If I can ask a question general about patent, how did you deal with this? Was this possible or not possible?
We patented the tech.
And where did you do this? Before you start talking about your project?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And as academics, we had to be really careful because as an academic, publish or perish. Yeah. If I publish, I can't patent. So we were.
How long it took to get this patent? Roughly. Roughly, yes.
Filing doesn't take that long. It's it's what happens after you file.
Who chose you this patent? Because it's so many options and all similar.
In the end, we didn't have much of a choice because UWA patented it for us very quickly through Griffith Hack and Raise.
The last question, is it very expensive?
Yeah, shitload expensive. And what's worse is that you think you're just paying a one-time fee, and then every year, and then every country you want to keep going, every new jurisdiction, there's more money. So you think it's just a little bit, and then it just seems to be a gift that keeps giving. Every single year that patent cost comes up. And we had, there's a company in the US who had a really, really good patent writer, and they had an acoustic belt for a condition called post-operative ileus. So after you have surgery, your bowel goes to sleep, and you can't feed people when your bowel's asleep because then that leads to infection and possible death. But you don't want them sitting there starving because they're sitting in a hospital bed and time is money, they want to get you out. So they had basically a very simple belt that would listen and go, oh yeah, gut noises, go and back and start eating. Normally, a doctor or a nurse would come around and listen on the stethoscope, yep, she's good to go, feed her. So they couldn't couldn't sell it because everyone had a stethoscope. Like, why did you need an acoustic belt? So they couldn't sell it, but their patent was so broad, it meant that we didn't have a lot of freedom to operate because their patent was so well written. God bless them. So there is an art, and I'd say to people, you can probably work out your trademark yourself, but for the patents, you need someone who's really, really clever and worth doing, because their patent stopped us hugely. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, because I heard you say earlier on about getting successful money from competitions, etc., and awards, and then but I think you just said more recently you got all of your money from high net worth individuals. So I just wanted to clarify.
So we met the high worth individuals at these award nights because they were there, because they had invested in other startups, so they were actually there enjoying the night.
Okay.
So that's how we met them. In terms of money from competitions, there were very few of them. The Innovator of the Year had prize money. It was 75k and 25k for the category we won. So there was some cash, but most of them there wasn't. Pitch for $1 million, that had $1 million attached to it. But most of the awards, it's actually not about the cash, it's about the PR. It's about, how do I meet the people in the room? How do I meet other startups who are 2 steps ahead of us who've got investors? Will they introduce me to those investors? But the investors were in the room because they all come out these lavish black tie events, hoping that their startup wins, and then I just make sure that I win and that so they hear about.
So pretty much like 99.9% of your money came from high net worth individuals.
Almost all of it. We started off when we first started. We tried that crowdfunding. Oh my God, that was much harder work. And maybe that's because I was, I'm a novice. And remember, I'm an academic. I'm not a startup. I had done this before. This was very new to me, so I really didn't know how to do crowdfunding. We raised maybe 10, 12k, and we got philanthropic. We got a $1 million donation, but that kind of money doesn't always fall out of the sky. But we just happened to find someone who's very rich, whose daughter had IBS, and who's
So $1 million of that 2.5 was
no, that was before. The 2.5 was high net worths, and as I said, the raising and chasing the money was so much fun. Full-time job, loved it. Closing was much harder. So how do you close? We did the BTB, which is government matching funding grant, and I told investors the deadline is 12 o'clock on Friday. Give me the money by 12 o'clock. And I will immediately match it. So $1 million of that was federal government grant funding. We didn't actually need the cash in the bank on the Friday, but once I had the cash, because people don't want to hand it over until the very last minute, so we just kind of had this, the government grant, the matching funding kind of forced everyone to come in. They all came in under the same terms, and we wrapped it all up at 11:59, money's in my account. By 12 o'clock, I'd already put it into interest deposits, and you always want to spend all of it in one lot. But yeah, you've got it much better. But that closing it was very hard, and I think it would have gone on for another 3, 4, 6 months if I hadn't had that government grant. And kind of, we're closing now, we've got to close, it's 11:59, you're in or you're out. I can immediately add an extra $1 million to this raise if you come in now. And that's how it's closed.
Once you got the money, and you had probably different people that wanted different levels of information from you about how you were going, how did you manage that process?
So someone gave me this great advice, which was this newsletter we put out after every board meeting. Well, 2 things. Because we had government funding and we had a board, I made sure that all of these progress reports for these grants, the same information was given to the board, and so I kind of trained the board. Here's how we present information, so I don't have to double up and do it twice. At the end of every board meeting, I put out a newsletter which basically contained that same data, so I wasn't, redoing stuff. And one of my investors had said, send it to me by snail mail, hand addressed, which I did every time. because it's harder for them to just email it on. If it's bad news, it's harder. It's easier these days because, take a photo and you can have it on the internet in 2 minutes, I get that. But there was something about that handwritten note and the handwritten address, and I would still have investors say, I always knew it was your handwriting. Or if I had outsourced it to someone else to do, you could tell my handwriting, you could tell it was from me, I'd taken that time. And then it was just a standard kind of 2-page newsletter, same headings every time. The financial data was always displayed in the same way. And just to build up that authenticity, that integrity, I'm really trying to build a relationship with this person. And thank God we did, because, tech failed. I had to have some really hard, serious conversations. But I built a relationship with these people so I could have those conversations. And that was really important. There was nothing that they didn't know that wasn't in that newsletter. So they knew where the risks were, and that was, we had a risk profile in there. So they always kind of knew. I found that actually there were some that were really interested, some I didn't hear from ever. In fact, there was one investor I never met face to face.
So just trying to understand the journey. So you sort of pitched it based on this product, developing, didn't really work out as planned. Then you pivoted to the food-based product.
Yeah.
And you've got another idea as well that you're working towards, another tech, like physical thing or something? Or?
Digital. So we found that one of the horrible things about medtech is really, really complicated. And we had 4 microphones that you had to put on your abdomen. And once it left our lovely clinical trial room where we put it on for you, someone had to put 4 microphones on their abdomen. Never underestimate the stupidity of people trying to find their abdomen. You can't talk on the telephone. But this one will only be quick. That completely dirtied our data, So one of the things we learned is if we could get rid of the actual physical device, oh my gosh, that solved so many, or took out so much more risk. So we pivoted to a digital biomarker where we ask basically poop. We ask a lot of questions about your poop, and we can get to a diagnosis with the same or better accuracy than listening to your gut muscles.
Like an app or something?
For the competitions,
Yeah.
is the critical steps for them the same as an investor? Because I'm still a little confused about how your story on digestion and poop won all of these awards. What was the X factor that nailed it for you, do you think?
So I was reviewing. Someone gave me their award application to review the other day, and it was really lovely. Oh, it's really sweet, and it was mental health and kids. Oh, this is lovely. And I wrote back to her and said, you didn't actually tell me why you wanted to win it. And she was flying through the paper. Where's that question? Of course, the question's on there. Tell me why. Where's your ask? Tell me why you want to win this. So I really make that very specific. So why should Innovator Review? Why should you vote for me? I'm a female founder in Perth. Ta-da! And my co-founder, female. I've got co-founder Mary Webley. We're going to look great. We're going to be great spokespeople for female founders in the startup community in WA. You want to be associated with us. We've both got PhDs. We're going to make you look good. Here's how we can make you look good. And here's how we can build the whole community. Because once we've won this award, we're going to go and tell everyone else about this award and how fantastic it is. And in fact, every year we're going to come back and we're going to tell people how we wrote our application and give people tips on how. So we just it was a sales job around why you should vote for me and not someone else. And even as a finalist, so there's 3. So the 3 awards I did this year, finalists in all 3. Have we won? One of them is still outstanding. We'll find out in November. Will we win any of them? Very, very unlikely. It doesn't matter. It's still on my email chain. It's all over the internet, all over our website that we're finalists. It's that social credibility. There's a LinkedIn article on it. In fact, I haven't gone out with our latest one because I feel if I did, people are going to go, oh my God, not another one. It feels weird now to go out because we've done in such close succession. They build credibility, social credibility. If you can win Innovator of the Year award, then investors, then how would that look to an investor? From a first-time female founder, someone else has thought that actually what we're doing is valid and good, and so that's why we all tied it together. But a big piece of it, as I said, was when you go to these award nights, the investors are in the room. You don't know who they are, 'cause sadly, this person over here doesn't have a sign on their head saying, actually, I often give out checks for 250K. I don't know that, and I don't know who he is, but they are in the room, and then your job is to be really forensic around, hey, who's that person over there? Why are they sitting on your table? Oh, they invest in us. Great. Let me give you an intro. I really want to get to know this person. I'll go and have a drink with them. And that's when your GAICD pitch will come out. Hey, did you know that? And then here's my business card picture. So it was all part of the strategy, and I wanted, because we didn't have that Rolodex, I didn't know Bangalore had $2.5 million. How do you build the momentum? Everybody was talking about mental arts. And everyone had seen the picture of the girl. Everyone had seen it.
How many slides in the pitch deck? 8 only?
Yeah. So we had a base of about 30 or so, and we just choose the most relevant, custom designed each time. But people are not attentive, and you want them actually. You can't, unless you're a filmmaker, you can't build a story. There's nothing you can do on here that's going to be as effective at building a relationship as you standing, talking to someone, making eye contact, calling them by name. You're just trying to get that next meeting. Your PowerPoint's not going to do that. It's for reinforcement. It's for some of those graphs you're going to have to show, but it's only for things to communicate perhaps in a different way. It's the picture of the belt. So, and sometimes when we've had a huge stuffer because the tech hasn't worked, that's all we've pitched with is Flora. The best pitch I saw was at the Lasanne's Best Pitch of the West. It was we started about 6 o'clock in the evening. By 7 o'clock we're all starting there. Oh God, this is going on. And a startup which no longer, sadly, called Gelabo was there. Gelabo make ice cream from ugly fruit. And they came out with this, with bruised avocados and things, and they came out with this chocolate gelato. And it's 7 o'clock and we're starving. And I don't know what she said, she was just talking, but we're like, oh, how good is this? That made the pitch, even though her slides were stuffed because the IT gremlins got in there. Everything about the pitch was terrible, and we're there, oh, this is so good, I love your startup. Yeah.
Transferable is this process if the pitch is not about actually trying to get money from people. So if it's more about trying to sell a concept or trying to attract people to sort of be part of what you're interested in.
I think the GAICD pitch is perfect for every occasion. And as I said, when I'm selling Superflora, I often don't have 30 seconds and 3 sentences. I'm trying to pitch it to the guy who owns IGA at Wembley, and he's probably, because of his staffing issues, he's probably stacking shelves or working on the checkout himself, and I have less than 30 seconds. So if I can work out what does he care about, and what is he interested in? He's interested in local. They only want local products. They want products that aren't at Coles and Woolies, and he's not competing. I've learned that he doesn't want to, he wants unique products so people come to his store. He doesn't want to know that it's on every chemist up and down the street. And he wants to know that I'm going to come. He doesn't have time to reorder, so he wants to know that I've got a proper barcode on the bottom and I'll stack it myself on the shelf and I'll handle the reordering process. So now I've learned that about him from other people that will work out what my pitch has to be, but I've literally got 10 seconds.
So it's very specific.
Very specific. And it's specific every single time. So I think it's still useful, and perhaps when you start practicing your GAICD pitch and barbecues, you'll get into it.
Oh, that's
You know, we get grant that you were
the GAICD grant.
said to them, you have to.
I had applied for it.
Yeah, so you've applied and said that you already have the.
So most of the government grants will give you a little bit of leeway, showing you've got some interest. Well, we had we had Barry in the bank. So show me you've got some interest, and by this particular date you have to have the money committed. But you actually don't have to have the cash in the bank. They give you a little bit of extra time to do that. So you have to show intent and, you know, commitment and some evidence that you're speaking, but you don't actually have to have the money in the bank until several months down the track.
And they give you a good idea of the indication that you will be successful in the grant.
Yeah. Some of them work differently, like the accelerating commercialisation grant. They may have different rules around when you need the cash in the bank or what type of letters of commitment. But sometimes you just need a letter from someone saying, yes, I'm speaking to Josephine about noisy guts. We're thinking about investing, you know, something quite vague, and they will be okay with that. But all of the grants have slightly different rules. Hello.
Hi, nothing questions. So what is the duration, like typical duration of
Look, it changed almost every time, but often it was less than 10 minutes. What people really wanted was not someone standing up delivering content. What they really wanted was to be able to ask a lot of questions. So actually the less I talked, if I talked for 3 to 5 minutes, and then just allow them to ask questions. And I've got my slide deck there. I've got 8 slides, but I've got my 30 of all the different Q&As that I've got from the venture capitalists. If they were really that serious, then they might spend an hour with me. But they wanted to leave that conversation. It wasn't about me pitching and me going blah. It was about a two-way dialogue. And really, people say they invest in you, not your tech. They actually wanted to know, you know, I needed to give them time to actually get to know Mary and myself. So actually, it was less. You know, there was never a time where I'd stand up and pitch, like one-way pitching, for more than 10 minutes. It was always, here's the pitch, and I'd try and do that in as less time as possible so that we had more time to talk. What are you interested in? What other startups have you invested in? Is there any, you know, because that was the type of information that was most useful to me. Because then I'd go out and find out who have you invested in and which investments have gone well for you, what kind of investor are you? Are you going to do you want to position on the board? If you can't find that information out anywhere. So the more I would talk and the more questions I'd ask, the more I would learn that.
And then the truth you're presenting most likely to people that are not from the medical field. How do you get past the medical target and try to explain that
yeah, it's a tough one. In the end, there were half, I would say half actually were GPs or in the medical, so that kind of helped. But for the other half, they were either interested in tech or they were just interested, they thought it was a good idea. So with, I guess we worked out how to communicate it in a way that we wouldn't lose people. So we started with, have you ever wondered what your grumbling gut is trying to tell you? We'd start at that kind of, start with the story. And we had this amazing story about Barry, Barry at Innovator of the Year, listening to this engineer at ECU talk about termites. And he had some tech that you put into the foundation of building and it listens to termites. So we had this great story and he came back to me, written on the back of a napkin, hey, could we listen to Borbury gut noises? So we had this backstory that we'd weave in to try and get people interested and curious. Oh yeah, I wonder where this is going to go. So yeah, having that story helped.
There's one more question.
Yeah.
When you've got the investors, you said you want to look in the white of their eyes and know that you can take money from them and what the strings are attached. How do you go if you decide, well, this is actually probably not going to be good for me, maybe you don't want to take this person's money? Have you had that situation and how have you dealt with that?
I haven't had that situation. It's probably because I wasn't fussy enough, because we were just like, I've got to get money because we're going to run out of money, and So I probably didn't do enough due diligence the other way. It was all about, I just have to get the money. I just have to. So I probably didn't ask as many questions. What I found is that among the female founders in Perth, people don't want to come out and say this is a good investor, this is a bad investor. No one wants to say that because we're in a really small community and Perth is a small place. But talking to other investors, other startups who had investment, and off the record they'll start saying, hey, be careful of this money. This money might have strings. Are you prepared to give them a seat on the board? Are you prepared for their accountant to come onto your board with you? Are you prepared for... So they started... Yeah, certainly if I was raising again, I would have asked more questions of the investors themselves and done more research about what kind of money is this. Because there is... And I hear that from people all the time of good investors, tough investors. Yeah. So your other startups, and that's why the startup community is so important, because people in the room will have investors and you can talk to them about it. It's kind of stuff you can't Google. Yeah. I've talked to them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is that it? Well, thank you very much. Anything you want to take away from your talk?
No.
But thank you so much, Joey. How do people get in touch with you if they want to find out?
Noiseguts.com, that's me.
Awesome.
Or on LinkedIn or...
Well, look, we've got half an hour of networking now. I want to hear some
Gabby pitches. I want to hear some Gabby.
Yeah, tell us some Gabby pitch.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, we've finally locked in Tim Brewer, who's from Functionally. He's so if you're at the stage where you want to grow your organisation, maybe you've done your product market fit and validation, and you're now thinking, okay, I want to be this massive company in 5 years' time. How do you do that? Like, how do you scale? How do you organise your teams? That's what Functionally does, and he's learnt a lot just talking to companies that are going through that process. So he's going to talk about that in 2 weeks' time. So come along and have a listen. Please, I forgot to put up the Keep Space slide, so grab some brekkie. Keep Space, by the way, if you're in the e-commerce game and you need to get goods out to people, they've got a warehouse here in Perth and now over in Melbourne as well. So get around Keep Space and enjoy your morning, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.